The opposite has happened. The major wars have happened on the fringes of Europe and not in Asia. And no European asked the most basic question, why have we Europeans not learned to be as peaceful as the Asians? If any American politician dares to say, oh, this is not going to be the American century, this is going to be an Asian century, he's dead. 20,000 downloads is a success. Now, instead of 20,000 downloads, there have been 3.6 million downloads. Now, this is not a commercial because it's a free book. I'm not making money from this. But it's an indicator to you that the world is psychologically preparing for the Asian century.
喺睇片之前，大家記得分享、讚好同訂閱灼見名家，最緊要撳埋呢個鐘仔，咁你就唔會錯過我哋嘅最新影片。
Some strategic thinkers in various corners of the world assert the real battlefield of the World War III will be in Asia. East Asia and along with Southeast Asia are rapidly becoming what some people call powder keg, 火药桶 in Chinese. Now, how do you envision? Actually, you also, in another occasion, a few months ago, you said that we are going to witness the largest geopolitical contest for many, many years. You also said just moments ago. How bad could it be? And is military conflict inevitable? What's the best way to avoid it?
Well, I mean, that's exactly why I wrote my book, Has China Won? Because there's absolutely no question. Of course, you know, there's a wonderful Arab proverb which says, he who speaks about the future lies, even when he tells the truth. We will get surprises, right? No question. But in one area, there'll be absolutely no surprise. There is no question whatsoever that the US-China geopolitical contest will accelerate over the next 10 years. Now, in terms of what we in East Asia can do about it, I think it's important for East Asia to keep up its culture of pragmatism that we have developed. One of the most unusual things that's happened in our region is that at the end of World War II, virtually all the major wars were fought here in East Asia. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Sino-Vietnamese War. But after the Sino-Vietnamese War of 1979, right? For the past 45 years,
no major
there's been no major war. This did not happen by accident. This happened as a result of decisions made by countries and leaders here who understood that the priority is to focus on economic development and not get engaged in wars. So therefore, what we in East, I can tell you, if you look at my book, Can Asians Think? I quote several Western scholars who said at the end of the Cold War, Asia's future is Europe's past. So in the past, Europe fought all the big wars, World War I, World War II. Oh, that's Asia's future. Paradoxically, the opposite has happened. The major wars have happened on the fringes of Europe and not in Asia. And no European asked the most basic question, why have we Europeans not learned to be as peaceful as the Asians? That's what our friend Graham Allison, as you know, keeps saying. And you know, he wrote a book called Destined for War, in which he documents that throughout history, the number one power never gives up its position gracefully. I agree with the analysis that Graham Allison provides on all the case studies, but when he says in his book that war is more likely than not between the United States and China, I don't agree with him. And to be fair to him, he has modified that position also himself. Graham.
Yeah. Now, let's shift to civilizations or rise of re-emergence of Asia or Asian civilizations. Over 60 years ago, the famous English historian Arnold Toynbee, you know that the guy, right, visited Asia and spoke about the evolution of civilizations, their rise, decline, victory, and defeat. He wrote, I quote, "Dynamic shift of history can turn Asian civilization into the world's roundabouts." 历史的变迁可以使古老的文明成为世界回旋处。Sorry that I said that translate into Chinese because it's a beautiful line by the historian. Now, in the past few decades, a great man from Singapore, the man who is with us here, who hailed as Asia's Toynbee. This is not it's a big achievement, I would say. And in my view, there are probably only a half dozen people who have been so instrumental in forecasting and conceptualizing the revival and the growing global influence of Asian civilizations in our time. Now, you are undoubtedly one of them. Asia's historical rise or re-emergence can be seen in two major ways. You already mentioned one is on the regional peace. 40 years peace is not a small achievement. Secondly, on economic growth. Just give you one example that both of you and I work on the middle class. Out of 5 largest middle class countries in today's world, 4 are in Asia: China, India, Japan, Indonesia. The other one is the United States. So these are really tell you so much about the power and the influence of Asia in our era. Now, also, for the first part and the security things, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the declaration of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, our subtitle. Here are my questions. What lessons and wisdom can Asia, especially ASEAN, offer to the world? So you already mentioned that. Could you be more specific tell about this development? Now, also that in what ways what you call the Asian civilization differ from Western civilization, especially its relevance in today's world? Kishore?
Okay, first on the rise of Asia, Edward mentioned several of my books, but this is my latest book, Living the Asian Century. But just before this book, I published a free book, an e-book, with a German publisher called Springer Nature.
3 million hits.
No, yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is that the publisher
3 million downloads.
told me that the target number of downloads for that free open access book should be 20,000. 20,000 downloads is a success. Now, instead of 20,000 downloads, there have been 3.6 million downloads in 160 countries. Now, this is not a commercial because it's a free book. I'm not making money from this. But it's an indicator to you that the world is psychologically preparing for the Asian century. Everybody can see that the Asian century is coming. But the West, of course, is in denial about it. And you know, if any American politician dares to say, oh, this is not going to be the American century, this is going to be an Asian century, he's dead. So this is an example of what I mean about, you know, if you believe that you should base your statements on data, on evidence, data and evidence says Asian century. But you cannot say it. Amazing. It's the truth. But you cannot speak it. You mentioned middle-class statistics. The statistic that I use is for what I call the CIA countries. CIA is not Central Intelligence Agency. CIA is China, 1.4 billion people. India, 1.4 billion people. ASEAN 700 million people. Total population 3.5 billion, almost 40% of the world's population. Now, in the CIA countries, out of 3.5 billion people in the year 2000, only 150 million had middle-class living standards. But by 2020, in 20 years, that number exploded from 150 million to 1.5 billion, an increase of 10 times in 20 years. This is an example of what I mean, that is unprecedented change in human history. And by 2030, that number could hit 2.5 to 3 billion. Can you imagine that? We've gone from 150 million in the year 2000 to close to 3 billion by 2030. That's an amazing shift, right? And that's why you should say is the Asian century.
中意名家分析，記得俾 like 同埋分享，支持同訂閱卓見名家，最緊要撳埋呢個鐘仔，咁就唔會錯過我哋嘅新片。